Guten Tag, Klasse. Heute lernen wir Konjunktiv I. Das ist in Kapitel 4b auf Seite 44 in deinem Heft. In our previous chapters, we learned about the Konjunktiv II, that there's the present tense forms, there's the past tense forms, but there's something also called the Konjunktiv I, which is used to report what someone else has said. So this is indirect speech. We saw it in the Fotoroman when George said, "My Professor sagt, es sei eine gute Sache." So my professor says it is a good thing. Or Sabita said, sie hat gesagt, sie werde sein Geschenk mitnehmen. So she has said she will bring his present. So talking about Melina there. So this is indirect speech telling someone else what someone else said. To form the present tense of the Konjunktiv I, you add these conjugation endings to the infinitive stem. So no matter what the verb does normally, we're only working with the stem here. So you're adding e, est, e, en, et, or en. Notice that just like the Konjunktiv II, the modal verbs, that ich und sie s forms are identical. Only the verb sein is irregular. The stem of sein is sei. And the first and third person singular, instead of having e endings, will have no endings at all. But boy, is it nice that there's only one irregular verb for us to deal with here. So what does that mean that we're working with the stems of the verbs? Well, we're kind of ignoring the usual conjugation of a verb. So let's look at geben for a second. Normally, geben conjugates as ich gebe, du gibst, gibt, wir geben, ihr gebet, und sie geben. Notice how the du and sie s form changed a vowel to an I. Well, we're only working with the stems. And the stem of geben, we take away that en and we work with the stem is geb. So we're adding the conjugation endings to geb to make this indirect speech. Ich gebe, I give, du gebest, you give, sie es gebe, he, she, it gives. So we're just working with the stem. We're not following any of its other typical conjugation rules. So same thing if you look at können. Normally, it conjugates to ich kann und du kannst. Sie es kann. And then it goes back to normal for können. Well, we're ignoring that. We're not changing that vowel. We're working with the stem of können, so we take off the en. That's können. So ich könne, I can, du könntest, you can, sie es könne, he, she, it can. Haben looks pretty similar, ich habe, but notice it's du habest, not du hast, because we're working with the stem, which is H-A-B. And then looking at sein, this was the one that was irregular. Notice no e ending for the ich and sie es form. So ich sei, du seiest, sie es sei. So I am, you are, he, she, it is. So this is indirect speech. So for example, Herr Brown says, the earth is, die Erde sei. I'm saying die Erde sei instead of die Erde ist because this is me telling you what Herr Brown said. I don't know if it's true. It's indirect speech. I'm just passing it on. So me changing the verb form to Konjunktiv I instead of using ist is telling you that I'm just passing that information along. It's not something that I for a fact know to be true. Looking at this other example, meint, he believes, dass die Lösung dafür habe. So instead of saying that he has, hat die Lösung, he has the solution, I'm just passing on the information that he believes that he has. So instead of using typical hat, we're using the habe form. And using habe is that indirect speech. So he believes he has a solution for it. I don't know whether or not that's actually true, but that's what he believes. So that's why we're using this indirect speech. There are lots of ways that we can report that someone else is saying something. So here are some useful verbs. Antworten, to answer. So you can say like, he answered that, and then you're going to use indirect speech to tell me what he answered. Same thing, behaupten, to claim. Berichten, to report. Denken, to think. So like, she thinks that, and then you're going to use indirect speech to tell me about what she thinks. Erklären, to clarify. Erzählen, to tell. Fragen, to ask. Glauben, to believe. Meinen, to believe. Und sagen, to say. Just like any other sentence, if you have a das clause, the verb's going to go to the very end of the clause. In this indirect speech, you can choose to leave out the das. I still think it's best to use it. It's the most common, but you can leave it out. If you leave it out, you're not going to move that verb to the end. So you might see a sentence like Max berichtete, Max reported, benutze, he uses, seit Jahren eine Fahrgemeinschaft. So he uses a carpool, seit Jahren, so for many years. So notice it says benutze, not benutzt, because it's reported. He's reporting that. I'm just passing along that information. To form the past tense of the Konjunktiv I, you use the Konjunktiv I form of haben or sein with the past participle. So if you're working in the past tense, you might have previously thought to say it like, use the pencil tool here. All right. Paul sagt, hat dich angerufen. So Paul says he has called you. Well, he claims he called you. Maybe he didn't actually call you. We don't know if it's true or not. So because we're just reporting what he said, to make that past tense, we're going to use the Konjunktiv I form of hat, habe dich angerufen, because it's reported speech. This is just something he claims. So now it's past tense. We're following all those past tense rules. We're just changing the helping verb to be in the Konjunktiv I to make sure that it's reported speech. The same thing goes if you wanted to report what someone else has said about the future. You're just going to change werden to be indirect speech. So Frau Müller sagte, sie werde ein Hybridauto kaufen. So that she will buy a hybrid car. It could also be the werden, the hypothetical Konjunktiv II form. So it could be will or would, because that's the stem of werden. The next example, Wissenschaftler sagen, sie werden eine Lösung für die Erderwärmung finden. So sie plural, werden stays werden, they will find. We can do another example. So maybe du wirst recyceln. You will recycle. Well, if you say you will recycle, I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what you're telling me. So if I'm passing this on, I want to do the reported speech form, the Konjunktiv I of werden. So the stem there is werd. So ich werde, du werdest recyceln. because I'm using this form, people can tell that it's indirect speech rather than du wirst, which is just fact. In conversation, you can still report what someone else said using the typical verb conjugation that you're familiar with called the indicative, especially when you want to show that you agree with what was said or that you believe it to be true. However, like I've been saying, this reported speech form, the Konjunktiv I, you can use that to express skepticism or doubt. Like whether or not you don't know if something's true, that's just what this person said. You do, however, need to remember that if you're reporting what someone else said, you might have to change some pronouns or possessive adjectives. So, for example, we have a quote from Paul here. And Paul said, Ich freue mich auf meinen Urlaub. I'm looking forward to my vacation. Well, if you're now reporting what Paul said, you don't want to say Paul says, I am looking forward to this. We're saying Paul says he is looking forward to his vacation. Not using I and my, we had to change the pronouns. Like he is looking forward to his vacation. If I left it as ich und meinen, then I'm talking about myself, and it doesn't make sense that Paul said that. You would hear the Konjunktiv I pretty frequently in formal contexts like news reports, political speeches, and scientific writing, mostly because people are reporting what's being said without implying that the information is necessarily true or accurate. So maybe if you wanted to quote some research that says that acid rain is great for weeds, well, we don't know if that's true. So we would use the Konjunktiv I to talk about it. Sounds kind of odd to me. Why would it be bad for all other plants, but all of a sudden it's okay for weeds? Well, I would use the Konjunktiv I and say es sei gut rather than es ist gut. So for your verb slides here, if we're using the Konjunktiv I, we're going to have to change things a little bit. So the present tense sentence you were given for ausschalten, for example, which means to turn off, is ihr schaltet das Licht aus. You guys turn or are turning off the light. Well, we're going to have to add that indirect speech element. So I would say ihr sagt. So you guys say you are turning off the light. So ausschalten, if we take away that en, we're left with the stem, ausschalt, and then the conjugation ending for indirect speech for ihr is et. So ihr sagt, ihr schaltet das Licht aus. So you guys say you are turning off the light. For den Planeten retten, retten is to save. So the present tense sentence we are given, wir retten den Planeten, we are saving the planet. Well, Konjunktiv I, I do need to make it that indirect speech. So I might say wir denken, we think we are saving the planet. We don't know if it's true or not. So wir denken, wir, and then retten, take off the en, so you're left with the stem, R-E-T-T, and the wir conjugation ending adds an en. Wir denken, wir retten den Planeten. We think we are saving the planet. So it looks just like present tense because the stem doesn't change at all in the present tense, so it's identical to the Konjunktiv I. That's not always the case, especially for the du and RZS forms. But for ihr, wir, and sie, it's pretty common that they're still the same. Looking at recyceln, to recycle, we take off, it doesn't have an en, just the n. So if I take that off, I'm left with the stem, recycle. So the present tense sentence we're given, Die Schule recycelt Papier. Well, if we're doing indirect speech, we can say Die Schule sagt, the school says the school recycles paper. We don't know if it's true. Have you seen the recycling truck? So we're going to use indirect speech to report this information. Die Schule sagt, the subject is Die Schule. I want to take the indirect form of recycled. So the stem is recycle. And the conjugation ending for ich and the RCS form is an I. Die Schule recycle Papier. The school says the school recycles paper. So instead of recycelt, the ich and RCS forms end in an I for that indirect speech. Let's look at wegwerfen, to throw away. The present tense sentence we have, du wirfst zu viel Müll weg. You throw away too much garbage. So indirect speech, I'm just going to say do, instead of says, I'll use denken again. Du denkst. You think you throw away too much garbage. We don't know if that's true or not, so we're just saying that's what you think. So instead of wirfst, the stem of wegwerfen, remember it separates, so weg will still be at the end. Take off the en, here's my stem, werf. Du werf, and to conjugate with Konjunktiv I for du, we add an est. Du werfest zu viel Müll weg. You think you throw away too much garbage. All right, this is the last one I'm showing you as an example, so take some time, try to do some more on your own. Make sure you let me know if you have questions. Viel Glück!